All right, from the beginning, we are now learning a Sikha in L'chuti Sichas Zion. And it's about this week's portion that we read in the land of Israel. We read one Torah reading ahead of outside of Israel. So we're learning this week Emor. Emor is talking about the Kohanim. It begins talking about the Kohanim, the priests. And it says that there are certain people that the Kohen is allowed to defile himself for. A Kohen has to work in the Holy Temple. Because he has to work in the Holy Temple, he cannot become defiled by a dead body. Because a person who's defiled by a dead body can never work in the Holy Temple again until they sprinkle on him the ashes of the golden cow. You ever hear the golden cow? The red cow, I'm sorry, the red cow, not the golden cow, the red cow.
I talk about the sin of the golden calf.
That comes to fix up the sin of the golden calf. The sin of the golden calf brought death into the world. When God gave the Torah, death stopped. But when the Jews, death is not a natural thing. No, it's not. When Adam was created, he was not supposed to die. When he ate from the tree, he brought a new thing into the world, which is called death. God is pure life, and God is everywhere. There's nothing outside of God. So everything should be alive. God is everywhere, and God is everything. Therefore, nothing should die. But as soon as Adam ate from the tree, so Adam separated himself from God's will, and he brought death into the world. Listen. When God gave the Torah to the Jews, so he brought back again eternal life. And as soon as the Jews ate from the tree, as soon as the Jews worshipped the golden calf, as it brought death back into the world. And the fixing up of this death was the red calf.
That might be God's will.
Of course it's God's will. Let's go. So it says, there are certain people that a Kohen is, yes, obligated to defile himself for. His mother, his father, his sister, his close relatives, his brother, his son, children, son, daughter, his wife. So it says these are all, there's sub-laws with all these laws and etc. But essentially that's what it is. So it says God is called a Kohen. Elokecha Kohenu. God is called a Kohen. And all the commandments that God commands us, he also does.
He's not a person. He's something else. He creates the whole world.
But God created us in his image.
Yep.
And so it means that there is some sort of an image. So
every person is his image.
Right. So God, of course, you're right, is certainly infinite. But on the other hand, God creates man in his image. That's what all the Kabbalistic books talk about. Okay. So it says that God does the commandments. When we learn Torah, God learns Torah opposite us. God, the negative commandments also, God is allowed to defile himself for the Jewish people because the Jewish people are considered to be like his daughter, also like his son. Yesh Laban, we have to understand. Now we're over here. We have to understand. Hari HaKodesh Baruch Hu, God ain't no stam Kohen. God is not a Kohen, Ela Kohen Gadol. If God is a Kohen, is a priest, so it must be that he's the great priest, the high priest. Well, the Kohen Gadol also litameh al kol nefashot meit. The high priest is not allowed to defile himself for anybody. Even for his son and his daughter. If so, shuv move on. So now, so it's not so. How can God take the Jews out of exile and defile himself? That's what it says in the prophet. That God defiles himself in Isaiah for the Jewish people. How can God defile himself? The Jewish people. God is not just a regular priest. He's the Kohen Gadol. He's the high priest. High priest is not allowed to defile himself. We'll see. The Marsha, Rabbi Shlomo Aderet, great Marsha, I think the previous Rebbe said, that if we had any appreciation of how holy he was, it would take all the dirt from his grave. All the dirt on his grave would be holy. People would want to have a little bit of the dirt in it.
That's disgusting.
The Marsha, why?
You can't take dirt. That's disgusting.
Why?
Dirt is for the ground, not eating.
Not to eat.
What does it eat?
Not to eat.
Then why we want to take dirt?
Because the dirt on the grave of this holy man is also holy. His name was Rabbi Marshall. Okay, let's go.
Our ground will be clean.
Right, you'll be clean. Put it in a bag. She la'amito shel davar. Really, the fact is, God can never be impure. Says the Marsha. God can never be impure. Because a spiritual thing, because spiritual things can't become impure. Only physical things. And what it says by the Gemara, that God, so to speak, he immerses himself, in the Gemara in Sanhedrin, that God immerses himself in the river of fire after he buried Moshe. This is only just an answer to the question that was asked by an apostate. How could God defile himself by burying Moshe? Right? It says over there in the Gemara that an apostate approached one of the rabbis, and said, "I thought your God is a Kohen, is the high priest. Yes, how could he defile himself and bury Moshe? Not allowed to defile himself." So he gave the answer, he defiled himself, but afterwards, so how did he defile himself? And how did he become pure afterwards? So he said he defiled himself, and he became pure by immersing himself in a river of fire. That's what he answered. But the fact of the matter is he could have just answered, God never can become defiled. God's never defiled. So that's one answer. That's what the Marsha says. The Marsha, Rabbi Shlomo Aderet, says that in fact, God can't become impure. That's ridiculous. How can God become impure? God is spiritual. Lefi Yesboro, but according to what the Marsha says, Nitan Yeshiva, we could answer the question about what the Baltosva is. What God is called a Kohen. How is God allowed to defile himself? He really lo yitachen inyan shel tuma l'mayla, because God doesn't defile himself. God is impossible to become defiled. Says the Rebbe, but it's not so simple. Avaratam shel bal yatos v'yirak al she la'oto min. Only that question that was asked by the apostate. Lo haya kasher heich litma behetem lashkafato מספקת התשובה שישראל נקראים בנים למקום כי הוא ידע רק שאלוקים כהן הוא אך לא ידע שהקדוש ברוך הוא כהן גדול. It says this apostate, he asked the question, how can God defile himself? So they, in the Gemara over there, what did they answer? God defiled himself for the Jewish people. He will defile himself for the Jewish people because all the Jewish people are God's sons. Because they're God's sons, so a Kohen can defile himself for his son. But that apostate did not know that God is the Kohen Gadol. He's the high priest, and a high priest is not allowed to defile himself for his sons. Therefore, we have to come to the answer of the Marsha. The answer of the Marsha is that, in fact, God can never become impure. God is spiritual. But, nevertheless, it's hard to say that the whole entire answer in the Gemara, in this question in the Talmud, was only because this apostate, he made a mistake and he thought that God was just a regular Kohen. He thought that God was a regular Kohen, and therefore we could give the answer, that the Gemara answers that the Jewish people are God's sons and God could defile himself. We have to say that the fact of the matter is that not like the Marsha said, that God cannot become defiled. Like the Zohar says, that God can become defiled, and he does become defiled in order to save the Jewish people.
It's a bit complicated. You can't understand God's will.
Kaven since Shekach, Shabo Akusha mit Oreret, the question comes, Ketzad Nitma Kaviyachal HaKodesh Baruch Hu Kohen Gadol, bano lachoto betula. So if so, the Gemara says that God does defile himself, and he has to defile himself in order to take the Jewish people out of exile. No matter how defiled the Jewish people are, God can defile himself. Because so the Gemara answers, well, he does it because the Jewish people are God's sons, and they're his only and his daughter. So he can defile himself. Only problem with that is that God is a Kohen Gadol. God is the high priest, and a high priest is not allowed to defile himself for his son and his daughter. So if so, one second. So the question comes back: how is God allowed to defile himself for the Jewish people? Well, you have to understand. Of course, God can do whatever he wants, but once God gave the Torah, so to speak, God limited himself. Once God gave the Torah, he limited himself. He said, this is what I'm going to do. This is my desire. The Jewish people are my chosen people. No matter what, they're going to be my chosen people. And it explains very interestingly that that's the reason that in the prayers of Rosh Hashanah, right, in the Musaf prayer of Rosh Hashanah, so we sound the shofar in the middle of the Rosh Hashanah prayer, the Musaf prayer. And in this Musaf prayer, we bring 3 prayers in the middle. One, that God is a king, Malchiot. Another one, that God remembers us. And another one, that God listens to the shofar. 3 prayers in the middle. All the prayers of the year are either 19 prayers, like the Shemona Esrei we pray every week, or 7 prayers, like in the Rosh Hashanah, and like in Shabbat and all the other holidays. But in Rosh Hashanah, there's the Musaf prayer. Rosh Hashanah has 9 prayers. 3 first ones, the 3 last ones, like every other prayer. And then there's 3 in the middle. One saying is called Malchiot, Zichronot, Shofrot. One is Malchiot, that God, you are a king. Now, what's so special about this prayer? They bring 10 sentences from the Torah. 4 from the Torah, 3 from the writings, and 3 from the prophets, proving that God is a king. So to speak, forcing God to be a king. We say, God, listen, you can do what you want to, but you wrote in your Torah that you're going to be a king. You have to keep according to the Torah. Once God gave the Torah, he does not go outside of the Torah. Do you understand that, Zechariah?
Yes.
Same thing with sounding the shofar. God listens to the shofar. Why? Because it says in your Torah that you listen to the sound of the shofar. And if it says in the Torah, then God, you are obligated to do it. You wrote the Torah, and this is your will. And this is what God is.
You can't really understand God's will. God doesn't allow it.
Yes, but once God puts something in the Torah, we cannot say that maybe it's not to be taken literally.
It is. Because God wants it.
Right. What it says in the Torah has to be taken literally. Also has to be taken figuratively, and also has to be taken midrashically, homiletically, and it has to be taken kabbalistically. Defile himself. Yes. Exactly. And one of the things it says in the Torah is that God is a Kohen. And another thing that it says, and God is a great Kohen, Kohen Gadol. And another thing it says in the Torah, that God will defile himself for the Jewish people to take them out of exile. Now, this doesn't fit in. If God is a Kohen, and he is, it says that he's a Kohen, and he's a high Kohen. High, Midrash is also Torah. Elokeichem Kohenu. It says that God if God is really a Kohen, and God is a Kohen, and God is a high priest, so he's not allowed to defile himself for his son or his daughter. And another place it says that he does do so.
But he's not just a Kohen, he's a king.
But he's the king, but he nevertheless is the high priest. The high priest, even if he is the king and the high priest, nevertheless is the high priest. He has to keep according to the laws of what a high priest is. Can't defile himself. Hayesber, the answer is like this. Kol inyani habriya. Everything that is in creation, nikvu lamata, were set ba'oven ze or acher, Everything that exists here in the physical world is that way because that's the way it is in the spiritual worlds. The spiritual worlds are, so to speak, the blueprint for this physical world. Something like you have in a computer, right? You have a computer. Why does a computer work the way it does? It has all these letters and everything like that. Because there's the wiring and how the thing is programmed. You don't see the programming. You don't see the wiring. But because of that, the outcome is how the computer works. The same thing, the world. The world is just a result of the programming that's up in the upper spiritual worlds.
The underlying
Code.
Hashem coded the world.
Yes, that's right. Amnon, but makar nale be'ein aroch me'al hagdoras at nevroim lamata. Even though the truth that these upper worlds are incomparably in a totally different dimension of reality, infinitely more real than this world, but since these attributes from above, enom mufshatot legamri, since they are limited in some way, I mean they're the source of what happens in this world, so they must be. Or ein sof la'atzmo, that you cannot compare them to God Himself. She'en lo hagdara klal, hu pshut b'tachlit. God is totally infinite. Chesed gavura. I'm sorry, tachlit. Ela yesh lehem hagdarot v'kivun musyom. The upper worlds have a certain order. For instance, the 10 sfirot, kindness, power, etc. Therefore, yesh behem dimyon mesuyam lenivroim. Therefore, the upper worlds have something like this world. Mesuyamim lamata mithavim, to the worlds that are created from them. In this world, you have human beings. People also have kindness. They have severity. We come from the kindness and the severity, these aspects in the upper worlds, even though there's a totally different dimension. Right? It's like comparing $1 million to a picture of $1 million. Right? It's a totally different world, right? Comparing a living human being to a picture of a living human being, right? A picture of a living human being, a picture of a person. There's all sorts of pictures of a person, right? It's forbidden to throw the daily newspaper away because on the front it had a picture of Trump's inauguration. And there were hundreds of thousands of people there. So you're killing thousands of people. That's ridiculous, right? It's not really real. Well, this world is something like a picture of what reality is. But nevertheless, because reality, the upper worlds, the reality of the upper worlds does have some certain type of limitation. So therefore, we have to say, and these worlds come from the upper worlds. So we have to say that these upper worlds do have some sort of a shape. Sheba'em mitbatea shoresh ba'ofen bolet umugdar. That in the upper worlds, there's the source of these physical worlds. For instance, water. Water comes from below to above. This is comparable to the attribute of God, which is called kindness, which that's the source of water. Shemahuta hi hamshacha milamayla mata, that the essence of water is to be drawn from above to below. So it is also all of the other creations in the world. Therefore, the creations are in comparison to their source, the creations of the world are just like what do you want to call it? A mashal. How do you call it? A mashal? A parable, but it's not right in this world. A parable. A mashal. It's like no. These worlds are it's like an example just to put you into the subject. For instance, there's a movie, even Walt Disney made a movie explaining Einstein's theory of relativity. Made a movie. How did they get the movie? What did they understand? Because Einstein himself wrote a book, very, very simple, explaining his theory of relativity. Very simple. I once had it, in fact. Very simple book explaining the theory of relativity. And he explains that if a person is sitting in a train and he can't see anyone and there's a dock on the side, or another train, as he starts moving and there's no other point of reference, so he can't tell which train is moving. Is this train moving or is your train moving? And etc. And explains how there can be time warps and things like that. Okay. So in other words, what's the point? You want to understand something, for instance, about how God works. How does God work? You want God's kindness. So you pray to God, and this arouses God's kindness. How does that work? He says, well, I'll give you an example. A person, you also have kindness. Right? If somebody wants a favor from you, what do? They talk to you really nice, and they ask really nice, and they get a favor. So something like that is also by God. Talk really nice, and you evoke God's. Now, of course, God is infinite, and God is not the same thing as us, but nevertheless, it does work on the same principle. God has got kindness. And God's kindness is something like, in some sort of an infinitely billion times more real way than our kindness is. But it still is there. So we are like a mashal. We are like an example for God's kindness. Right? Like if you want to try to explain to a child what is mathematics, so you say, okay, you have 2 bananas. And your friend Joey gives you 1 banana. Now, how many bananas do you have? He says, oh, I got a lot of bananas. I don't know. How many, would you, for instance, with these bananas, would you be able to give 3 of your friends a banana? He says, no way, I couldn't do it. Why? Because I don't have 3 friends. I don't have 3 friends. No, you don't understand. This is just examples, right? These are examples that we're trying to bring to show you what mathematics is. Right? So, in other words, he says, once I got 3 apples. Yeah, I get it now. 3 bananas. Yeah, I have 2. He gives me 1. I got 3. Would this work with apples also? Would it work with apples? Let's try it. It says you have 2 apples. Somebody gives you another apple. Wow, apples and bananas it works with. This is really amazing. You know, want to see if it works with potatoes? No. We've tried our luck enough. I don't want to mess this up. It works with potatoes, and it works with money, and it works with everything. If you have 2 and someone adds 1, that's called mathematics. It's a general principle in mathematics. No matter what 2 things you have, if someone gives you another one, you've got 3. Oh, I'm starting to understand. No, these are just examples of a real spirit, of a real principle that exists. The same thing, everything that happens in this world is somewhat of an example of what really happens in the upper worlds. Okay, what's the Rebbe trying to get at? Therefore, okay, Kavan since Shah Ratzon Elyon, since that God's will is that there should be Yediyah v'Hasaga Sichlis B'Darga Shalamayla, since one of the things that God wants is that we should try to understand Him as much as possible. Did you know that, Zechariah?
Yes.
God wants us to try. True, in God's essence, we can't understand. We're just creations. But nevertheless, God gave us a mind. You have a mind? Yes. And God wants you to use that mind not only to understand how to tie your shoes, and not only to understand how to make your tax returns, but also to use your mind to try to understand God. Is this possible? That's why we have great people like Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai and the Lubavitcher Rebbe, etc., that can explain to us, and we can understand certain aspects. We can approach at least God. Shiyakiru Gedolaso, so we can recognize God's greatness. Shehu mufshat lechalutin, that God's greatness is totally separated from us. Lochen, therefore, nikbu gamba briyat inyanim sheme'al lahagbala. Therefore, the upper worlds also have a certain type of limitation. 10 sfirot. Yachasit lebriya, create and compared to us here in this world. Kadesha emtzuotam nitan yeh lekabel musa kol she kivyachol legabi iyagbalato shel kodesh baruch. In order we can understand the infiniteness of God. So what's the Rebbe trying to say? We, for instance, in Chassidut, in Chabad especially, but in Chassidut, we explain a lot about the upper worlds. The upper worlds, the worlds of Bria and Atzilus, and even before the Bria and Atzilus was created, before it was called the Tzimtzum. Remember we talked about the Tzimtzum a little bit last year? Remember we talked about that? God contracting himself, contracting his light. What does it mean? We talk about all these ideas and these spiritual ideas and these mystical things, not to teach us how great the spiritual worlds are, to teach us how great God is. That God doesn't just create this physical world, He creates totally realistic dimensions that are, the reality is infinitely greater than our reality, infinitely more aware of God. And those are just creations, just nothing. That gives us a little bit of an idea of who we're praying to and who we're serving when we do mitzvahs. Okay, But even these things in the world, that they are an example, an infinite example of what God is, they're not just a mashal alone, but they are, these were created Elohim kach mipnei shenivrim elu makorim bedargos elu sheme'al ishtalshus. Even the spiritual worlds, they also have their source, and their sources are also above them. Kafi shehagdarot mehavot mashal lemidot shelamayla, just like we, this physical world, is an example to the worlds that are above. Why? Because it comes from them. Well, you should know that these worlds that are above also come from other aspects of God which are higher than them. But calls out, nevertheless, so it's understood, no matter what these levels are, because they are not God, they are only creations, therefore they have the definitions and limitations. Therefore, when you use anything in the world as an example to the infiniteness of God, therefore we cannot mix in their limitations, because they cannot be an example for God. So this is like what you said, Zachariah. On one hand, we have a commandment to try to understand God. And how do we understand God? From this world, we can understand the upper worlds. And from the upper worlds, we can understand worlds that are higher. And from those worlds, we can understand even levels that are higher. All these are creations of God. And because God created them, so He created them in a certain form. So with this, we can start to understand what God is in His essence. Right, wrong. God is totally infinite. And all we can do is just approach God with these, which is a commandment. We have to love God with all of our hearts. So we can say, well, I love God because God, He gave me a nice pair of shoes. That's good, but that's a very small type of love. Say, well, I love God because God keeps me alive, gives me eyes. Well, that's a little bit more love, but that's also very limited. That's what He does for me. That's selfish. But still, it's loving God. I mean, that's pretty good. If I could get to that level, it's also wonderful. Right? I love God because He creates me. Then you can say, no, I love God for what I can do for God. No, then you have to have an appreciation for God Himself. How do you get this appreciation for God Himself? By understanding that I am a creation and I'm just an example of the upper worlds. And the upper worlds are an example of more real worlds. And all these are just creations. Think how great God is, infinite, and I can serve Him. Wow, it's incredible. For instance, let's take an example. The sun. Or the sun does not change by means of the light that comes out of it. This is an example for Ani Hashem Lo Shiniti. The sun is sort of an example of I am God, I never change. Well, especially you think that the scientists, they say the world exists already for 80 trillion years or something. So it means that the sun, same sun, has been shining for 80 trillion years. That's pretty amazing. It hasn't gone out yet. Therefore, the sun has this ability to shine infinitely. So it says, I am God, I never change. Ulafi ha'omor le'el, hi mehava mashal lekach, mipenei shehi nimshechetz kivyachol mishem hashavaya. God, the sun, can provide an example of infinite light to us because it comes from God's infinite light. Right? The sun keeps burning and burning and burning, keeps getting the sun. It doesn't seem to be dimming it down. Why? Because it comes somehow or other from God's infinite light, but it comes at a much lower level. But it's understood that this idea of the sun being limited is not a proper example from God. You say, oh, now I understand. God is like this round ball, and He's got this light coming out of Him. No, from the sun, you can understand that God is an infinite light. It shines. But don't think from the sun you can understand, oh yes, God is just a place. It's just, and then there's also the moon. God has an opposite God. Can't understand that. Good. What's the point? What's the Rebbe trying to get at? How can the God defile Himself? Oh. From this we can understand the difference between a regular Kohen and a high Kohen, the high priest. But a Kohen Gadol Shalamato, who Mashal V'Dugma Kohen Gadol Shalamayla. The high priest down here is an example for the high priest above. But it's understood that who mashal lakach befrat shel kuhuna v'kedusha nosefet shel kohen gadol shel amata. Of course, we have to understand that God is much holier than the high priest down here. Hagbalat sheyesh lakohen gadol amata, but the limitations that the kohen gadol has below, like for instance the limitations of the sun. The kohen gadol, because he's a creation, so this is only in his body. This is not an example for the kohen gadol above. What are we saying? Yes, God is a kohen and God is a kohen gadol, but do not apply the limitations that are applied to the kohen gadol here to God's kohen gadol. The same way you can't apply the limitations of the sun, that it's round, and say God is also round. God doesn't rule in the nighttime, only in the day. That's ridiculous. But there is something from the sun that you can take an example from God. Infinite light. His light shines all the time. The reason the sun shines all the time is because it takes that attribute of God that it shines all the time. But the other attributes, especially the negative and limited ones, you can't apply to God. The same thing with the Kohen Gadol. Kohen Gadol is a high person, he's very holy. That God has. But the limitations of the Kohen Gadol, that he cannot defile himself for his son or for his daughter, that God does not have. Lochem, therefore, it's understood. Shekiv and Shekohen Gadol, since the physical Kohen Gadol in this world, because he is a Kohen Gadol, he is not allowed to defile himself. His potential to defile himself does not come from the fact that he's big. It doesn't come from the fact that he is great, but it comes from his limitations, not because of his greatness. If he was really great, he should be able to do more things. The fact that he cannot defile himself is because, despite the fact that spiritually he's great, but still he's a human being in a body. Because he's a human being in a body, therefore he's not allowed to defile himself. Understand? The Kohen Gadol is a greater person than any other person. That's spiritually, but physically he's just like everybody else. So because this greatness is put into a body, so therefore the bodily aspect of him cannot defile itself. But the spiritual aspect of himself should be able to. It's above that. It's above being, right? It should be more unlimited because it's a higher level of spirituality. Therefore, this level of Kohen Gadol from above, he cannot become defiled. And that's what the Marsha said. But this level, which is called a regular Kohen, in this world also has its source in the upper world. The source of a regular Kohen in this world, since that a regular Kohen below, he can defile himself, even as far as he is a Kohen, and not only is he permissible, but he has to. He's got an obligation to defile for his family. Therefore, we can say that this level of the regular Kohen, that God is a regular Kohen, therefore he can defile himself. So God is not limited to the limitations of a great Kohen, that he cannot defile himself. Exactly the opposite. As a great Kohen, his spirituality is greater. Therefore, he cannot be defiled spiritually. And there's also another aspect of God. God, we can also call God a regular Kohen, that he is allowed to defile himself. And in fact, he has to defile himself. That's why God is going to defile himself to release the Jewish people from exile. According to what we said before, now we can understand how God buried Moshe. Let's just finish this. Moses, why? Because the level of the Kohen Gadol, it can't possibly be that he's impure. The question is in the regular Kohen, a regular Kohen. Therefore, it says that the Jewish people are God's sons, and therefore they can defile themselves. So in other words, the grand Kohen, because he is a grand Kohen, he is the Kohen Gadol, so it means he's at a higher spiritual level that cannot become defiled. Cannot become defiled at all. God is not physical. A Kohen Gadol in this physical world, though, even though he has this higher level of the soul that cannot become defiled, but because he's in a body, so therefore there's certain restrictions on him. A regular Kohen, on the other hand, has not got these restrictions. In fact, he has an obligation to defile himself for his son or daughter. So therefore, because the Jewish people are God's sons, and the Jewish people are like God's daughter, so therefore God, as a regular Kohen, he must defile himself for them. And as a Kohen Gadol, which God also is, he cannot become defiled. So he has no problem. Therefore, God can defile himself for the Jewish people because he can't become defiled as a Kohen Gadol, and he must defile himself for the Jewish people because he's also a regular Kohen.
I understand Kohen Gadol, I understand as regular Kohen. There's still this connection, Hashem. It's just missing this connection.
It says that God will defile himself for the Jewish people to take them out. Okay, the question is asked, how can God defile himself? God is a Kohen. So there's two answers. One answer is God is a regular Kohen, and a regular Kohen must defile himself for his son and his daughter, and the Jewish people are called the sons and the daughters of God. Number one. And if you want to say that God is a Kohen Gadol, which a Kohen Gadol has not got the permission to defile himself for his son and his daughter. So the Rebbe says, well, I'll tell you the answer to that also. A Kohen Gadol, in fact, cannot become defiled spiritually. But a physical Kohen in this world, because that spirituality, that great spirituality is in a body, so therefore the physical Kohen can be restricted and not defile himself. But that aspect of his limitedness and restrictedness, we can't apply that to God.
So when Hashem was buried, Moshe.
Right.
Part of him was not defiled, but spiritually he was
Kohen Gadol.
Or he was also burying him physically as a regular Kohen.
Right. And he did become defiled. Did become defiled, yes. But he had an obligation to. For us. God will personally come and take all the verstinkene sinners. And we're not talking about other people. Let's go into this.
We're not talking about us.
Well, we're not talking about us, we're talking about me. Right. I mean, all the other Jews that they do sins, so they're all in ignorance. What are they?
This does connect somehow to what I brought up earlier, that the Kohen Gadol can defile himself to bury
Moshe.
Who's got nobody to bury him.
Oh, Kohen Gadol, yeah, could be.
That person, that's the Jewish people.
Yes. But I don't know. I'll have to look up that law. I'm sorry, I have to look that law up. I have to look it up.
I think it's
could be right. A mace mitzvah everybody does, but I have to look it up. I'm not sure.
I mean, I could have it wrong.
I'm not sure of that law. I have to look. I'm sorry, you caught me unawares. Okay.
Somehow all fits all together, though.
On that pasuk it says, if that was the answer, then God, that Rebbe would have given that answer. Okay. On the pasuk va'atem tiyu li mamlechas kohanim. On this, that it says you. I don't see them down. Let's just finish. We have one more line. On the pasuk that you will be, the Jewish people will be a nation of priests. The Baal Turim says it means not just regular priests, but all the Jewish people will be Kohen Gadols. In other words, at the time of Matan Torah, all the Jewish people became Matan Torah, became Kohen Gadols. That's what this pasuk said. This is the sentence right before the Parshat Yisro, right before the Torah was given. See if the prayer they. Yeah, I think they are. So from this is understood that just like a Kohen Gadol of above cannot become impure, is also the same thing the Jewish people. In their essence, they cannot become impure. Because that's this level of Yechida of the Jewish soul. So if so, we say the tremendous dearness of God to the Jewish people, that he says, I will come and defile myself. Because the essence of the Jewish soul cannot become defiled of a Jew, but the outer part of the Jew can. This is only the revealed, the way the Jews think, speak, act, feel, but the essence of the Jew cannot be. So therefore God can say, listen, what do I have to defile myself for? The essence of a Jew is always pure. No, God defiles himself even for the outermost parts of the Jew. In order to take out the Jews totally from exile, God is willing to defile himself, and that is what's going to happen through Mashiach Tzidkenu. Right, for us.
That
even though a Jew and his...
I would defile myself for you, even though I would not defile myself for you.
Right. Even though the Jewish people, in their essence, they're okay.
Yeah.
But just the outer part, even a small little bit of defilement, Hashem says, I'm going to save you from it. As we'll talk about more, God willing, tomorrow. Beautiful. I'm going to be going